On the evening of November 9, 1989, the world witnessed a moment that would reshape history. Crowds gathered at the Berlin Wall, a barrier that had divided families, friends, and an entire nation for nearly 3 decades. People climbed on top of it, chipped pieces away, and crossed freely for the first time in 28 years. The fall of the Berlin Wall did not only reunite a country, it marked the end of an era, the collapse of a system, and the birth of a new world. To understand the impact of that night, we must look back at how the world arrived at that moment. The year was 1945. World War II had ended, but Europe lay shattered. Germany, defeated and devastated, was divided by the Allied victors into 4 zones of occupation, controlled by the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union. Although this division was meant to be temporary, the alliance between East and West quickly broke apart as political tensions emerged. The Cold War had begun. In 1949, 2 separate German states were formed. In the West, supported by the US and its allies, the Federal Republic of Germany emerged, known as West Germany, with a democratic government and a capitalist economy. In the East, under Soviet influence, the German Democratic Republic was established, or East Germany, a communist state tightly controlled by the ruling Socialist Unity Party. Berlin, despite lying deep inside East Germany, was also divided. West Berlin became a small island of Western freedom surrounded by communist territory, while East Berlin served as the capital of the East German state. For the next 12 years, Berlin became the front line of the Cold War. The contrast between the 2 sides became impossible to ignore. West Germany, aided by reconstruction programs and open markets, experienced rapid growth and rising living standards. East Germany, despite initial industrial strength, began to suffer economically, and political repression intensified. A growing number of East Germans sought to escape to the West in search of freedom and opportunity. By 1961, nearly 3 million had left East Germany, most of them through Berlin. The East German leadership saw this as a threat to its survival, and so, in the early hours of August 13, 1961, East German authorities sealed the border. Streets were blocked, train lines cut, and rolls of barbed wire stretched across the city. Soon, concrete replaced wire, and a wall began to rise. A wall that came to symbolize the Iron Curtain dividing the communist East from the capitalist West. The Berlin Wall would become one of the most infamous barriers in history. It cut through neighborhoods, separated families, and turned friends into strangers overnight. Guard towers, bunkers, and soldiers enforced the border with strict orders to shoot anyone attempting to escape. Over the next decades, hundreds would lose their lives trying to cross to freedom. The wall stood not only as a physical barrier, but as a powerful message to the world. The Cold War was far from over. Life on both sides of the wall unfolded under 2 very different realities. In the West, Berlin grew into a vibrant cultural and economic hub, supported by the Federal Republic of Germany and the Western Allies. Democracy, free speech, and open markets shaped daily life. In the East, the government maintained strict control over media, travel, and political expression. The secret police, known as the Stasi, monitored citizens closely, suppressing any dissent. Yet East Germany also developed strong social programs, education, and employment systems, creating a complex mix of stability and restriction. The Berlin Wall stood through some of the most dangerous moments of the Cold War. In 1961, American and Soviet tanks faced each other at Checkpoint Charlie, bringing the world to the edge of nuclear conflict. In 1963, U.S. President John F. Kennedy visited West Berlin and delivered his famous declaration of solidarity, Ich bin ein Berliner, reaffirming the West's commitment to the divided city. In 1987, another U.S. President, Ronald Reagan, stood before the wall and challenged Soviet leadership with a historic plea. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. As the 1980s progressed, the world began to change. Economic stagnation and political pressure spread across the Eastern Bloc. A new Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, introduced reforms known as glasnost and perestroika, openness and restructuring, encouraging more freedom of expression and economic modernization. These reforms sparked hope, but also fueled demands for change across Eastern Europe. By 1989, movements for democracy gained strength in Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. The walls of communism were beginning to crack. In East Germany, public dissatisfaction grew into mass protests. Cities saw peaceful demonstrations calling for freedom to travel, political reform, and basic rights. Week after week, the crowds grew larger. The East German government could no longer silence the voices of its people. On November 9, 1989, an unexpected announcement changed everything. An East German official mistakenly declared that citizens could travel freely to the West, effective immediately. Within minutes, thousands of East Berliners rushed to the checkpoints. The border guards, overwhelmed and unsure of what to do, eventually opened the gates. For the first time in 28 years, the people of East and West Berlin crossed freely into one another's arms. Scenes of celebration flooded the world. People danced on top of the wall, shared champagne, sang songs, and embraced strangers. Families reunited, friends reconnected. A barrier that had defined the Cold War began to crumble. Not through war, but through the power of the people determined to be free. The fall of the Berlin Wall marked the beginning of the end for the Cold War. Within less than a year, Germany moved toward reunification. On October 3, 1990, East and West Germany officially became one nation again. The political map of Europe shifted rapidly. Communist governments collapsed across Eastern Europe, and in 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolved. The world order that had existed since the end of the World War II had transformed. But the fall of the wall brought not only joy, it also brought challenges. Reunification required merging two very different political, economic, and social systems. Life in East Germany changed overnight. Industries collapsed, unemployment rose, and many felt uncertain about their future. Yet, despite these difficulties, Germany moved forward on a path of unity, democracy, and integration into Europe. The fall of the Berlin Wall remains one of the most iconic moments of the 20th century. It demonstrated the power of ordinary people to shape history. It symbolized the victory of freedom over division, of hope over oppression, and of unity over separation. It showed that walls built out of fear and ideology cannot stand forever. Today, pieces of the Berlin Wall remain as memorials, reminders of a time when the world was divided and of a night when that division began to fade. The fall of the wall transformed Europe, brought an end to the Cold War, and opened a new chapter in global history. More than 3 decades later, the legacy of that night continues to inspire movements for freedom around the world. The Berlin Wall fell because people stood together, demanded change, and refused to accept a life without liberty. When the Berlin Wall fell is not just a story about Germany. It is a story about humanity's desire for dignity, rights, and unity. A reminder that even the strongest walls can fall when people believe, when they speak, and when they stand together.